Welcome to your deep dive. This time we're really getting into it with Amy Zegart's Spies, Lies, and Algorithms. You want to know how intelligence works now? With the internet overflowing with information, but trust so hard to find.
You got it. The way intelligence agencies are adapting to this new world is fascinating. It's not your grandfather's Cold War espionage anymore.
Not even close. We've gone from microfilm and a hollowed-out coin to, well, what's the digital equivalent? Terabytes of data. Tweets that expose top-secret missions before they even start.
Exactly. Anyone with an internet connection can be an armchair analyst now, which is one of the biggest things Zegart highlights, I think.
It changes everything, right? I mean, look at the Osama bin Laden raid.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Huh.
Pakistan's military was totally in the dark, but some random IT guy in Abbottabad
Tweeted the whole thing live?
You heard helicopters, and that was it. Out to the world. It's almost funny, right? Years of planning this super-secret operation, and some guy with a Twitter account scoops them.
What does that tell us about the future of intelligence?
It tells us that information is power, and that power isn't just in the hands of governments anymore. Heck, even the National Reconnaissance Office,
Yeah.
the folks who build our spy satellites, even they're buying commercially available satellite imagery these days.
Wow. So the tools of espionage, they're available to almost anyone.
In a way, yeah. It's kind of like the Wild West out there, but instead of gunslingers, we've got hackers and data analysts.
And those analysts, they're human, right? Zegart talks about the 7 deadly biases they face, and I gotta say, some of those are things we've all fallen for. Like, who hasn't looked for information just to back up their own opinion? Confirmation bias. Guilty.
Totally. It's human nature. But in intelligence analysis, those biases can have terrifying consequences. Remember the lead up to the Iraq War?
Oh, boy.
Analysts were positive, absolutely sure, that Saddam Hussein had WMDs. So much so that they basically ignored anything that said otherwise.
Because it fit with what they already believed.
Exactly. And that kind of thing. Well, it makes you understand why Zegart included that chart from Sherman Kent, the intelligence analysis guru.
Vaguely. Refresh my memory.
He was trying to standardize the language of probability. Turns out even something like serious possibility can mean a million different things to different people.
Oh, right. It's like that line from A Few Good Men. Only it's not about handling the truth. It's about making sure everyone's even talking about the same truth.
Exactly. And that's one tiny piece of it. There's also this thing called optimism bias. It's that belief that everything will just work out, even if logic says otherwise.
You mean like how we all think we're amazing drivers? Statistically, we can't all be.
Right. And this kind of thinking can lead to some really bad decisions in the intelligence world.
And then there's, what was it? Framing effects?
Oh, yeah. Huge one. How information is presented can completely change how we see it, even if the underlying facts are the same. Think of it this way.
Give me an example.
Okay, imagine a medical procedure. You're told it has a 90% survival rate. Sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, I'd take those odds.
Now imagine being told it has a 10% mortality rate. Same information. Much scarier.
Whoa.
Zegart says this kind of framing happens with intelligence assessments all the time. Same data, but it gets interpreted in completely different ways.
So our brains are practically designed to be tricked. Is there even anything we can do about this?
Well, knowing about these biases is a start. If you're aware of them, at least you can try to compensate.
That's true. But you know what else messes with how we see intelligence? Pop culture. I mean, I love a good spy thriller as much as the next person, but
gives a warped view of the real thing.
Totally.
Zegart calls it spy-attainment, and it's a real problem.
Like, not every intelligence officer is James Bond, seducing their way across the globe.
And not every mission involves car chases and explosions.
Right. It's probably more like data entry and stakeouts.
Probably a lot more of that, yeah. The scary thing is that these fictional portrayals, they affect how we think about real intelligence work. Politicians have actually cited 24 when discussing torture. Like ticking time bomb scenarios are an everyday thing.
Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
It's terrifying how these fake narratives get into public opinion and even policy.
And don't even get me started on conspiracy theories. All those shows about shadowy deep states pulling the strings. It makes you wonder how much of what we think about intelligence is real and how much is just Hollywood.
That's a great question. And it takes us to another fascinating part of Zegart's book, The Motivations of Real-Life Spies. Why betray your country? Is it just about the money, or is there something more to it?
It's rarely as simple as the movies make it seem.
Definitely not.
Talk.
Take Aldrich Ames, the CIA officer who spied for Russia. Money was part of it, but he also admitted it was about ego. He wanted to prove he wasn't a failure.
Wow. So espionage can be driven by some pretty complex stuff.
For sure. And those motivations, they're not always easy to unravel, even for the pros. It's like trying to get inside someone's head and figure out what makes them tick.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing.
And then you've got historical cases that are still captivating today. Benedict Arnold, the Cambridge Five. Zegart dives into those iconic betrayals.
It's interesting how their reasons were so different, you know? Ideology, blackmail, even just wanting to belong. You realize there's no one-size-fits-all profile for a traitor.
Which makes the job of counterintelligence that much harder. How do you stop threats when the motives are so varied, so hidden? It's a fascinating puzzle, to say the least.
Speaking of puzzles, covert action. That's where things get really murky. People think assassination, spy movie stuff.
But it's a much wider range of activities than that, right?
Right. Zegart points out that it can be anything from spreading propaganda to secretly funding political groups. And those activities, they raise some serious ethical questions, especially in a democracy.
Totally. How do you balance national security with transparency, with accountability? It's tough.
Where do you even draw the line?
Not an easy question. Zegart gives this example of the CIA using balloons during the Cold War, dropping propaganda leaflets behind the Iron Curtain. These days, it's more about subtly shaping narratives in the media, especially around elections.
So, like a modern form of psychological warfare?
In a way, yeah. And it shows how hard oversight is in a world where information is everywhere, constantly shifting and being manipulated.
And then there's the whole debate about targeted killings, drones, covert ops, lethal force without declaring war.
Thorny issues, to say the least.
And technology just keeps making those questions more complex.
It's a lot to unpack.
To her credit, Zegart doesn't shy away from any of it. She lays out the arguments, makes you think about the morality of it all. It's a good reminder that the world of intelligence, there aren't a lot of easy answers, mostly shades of gray.
Absolutely. And those shades of gray are just going to get more complicated as we go further into the digital age.
Which brings us to cyber threats. And when I say interesting, I mean terrifying.
It's a completely new battleground, right?
Yeah.
And the rules are still being written.
That's a scary thought.
One of the biggest issues is figuring out who's behind it all. With a traditional attack, you know who attacked you. But with cyber, good luck.
It's like trying to catch a ghost.
Exactly. Zegart talks about Stuxnet, remember that?
Yeah.
The cyber weapon targeting Iran's nuclear program.
I vaguely remember hearing about it.
It was a sophisticated attack, had real consequences in the physical world, but even now people are debating who was responsible.
It makes you wonder what else is going on that we don't know about. Like a silent war hidden in the data.
And then there's deepfakes. AI-generated videos so real, they can make anyone look like they're saying or doing anything.
Okay, that sounds like something out of a movie, but it's not, is it?
Nope, it's real. And it has the potential to turn our whole information ecosystem upside down. Imagine a world where you can't trust what you see or hear anymore, where seeing isn't believing. Deepfakes could destroy trust, create chaos, maybe even start wars.
That's a terrifying thought. What can intelligence agencies even do about something like that?
It's going to take a whole new approach. Technology is part of it, but we also need things like media literacy, critical thinking. A healthy dose of skepticism wouldn't hurt either. We all have to step up and learn to tell what's real and what's fake.
That's something Zegart emphasizes a lot, right? It's not just about governments and spies anymore. We're all part of this new intelligence landscape.
We are. And that means we have to be informed, engaged, and learn how to evaluate the information that's thrown at us. Because in this world, everyone's a potential source, and everyone's a potential target. The stakes have never been higher. It really is a whole new world of intelligence. And what's so interesting is how this new way of doing things is bumping up against the old culture of secrecy that intelligence agencies are known for. Zegart really hits on this when she talks about the CIA memorial wall.
Oh yeah, the one with the stars. For every officer who died in service. I remember reading about it. It's moving, but also kind of spooky. All those blank spaces for the ones whose names are still classified, even in death.
Exactly. It's this really powerful symbol of how intelligence agencies have always worked.
Yeah.
Super secretive. But these days, with all the leaks and whistleblowers and social media, that wall of secrecy is getting harder and harder to maintain.
Yeah, it does feel like we're in this weird in-between time. Like the old rules don't work anymore, but the new ones haven't been figured out yet. No wonder there's tension inside these agencies.
Absolutely. And Zegart tackles that head on. She talks about the whole Snowden effect, how those NSA leaks really shook things up. Intelligence agencies had to actually deal with the whole security versus liberty thing publicly.
Yeah.
For once.
Right, because operating in the shadows is one thing. But when someone shines a giant spotlight on what you're doing, everything changes. Makes you wonder if there's any way to balance secrecy with the public's right to know what's going on.
$1 billion question, right? And there's no easy answer. But here's the kicker. Zegart says that one of the unintended side effects of leaks like Snowden's, it can actually lead to more overclassification of information.
Wait, really? You'd think it'd be the opposite, like governments would be more careful about what they keep secret.
You'd think, right?
Oh, wow.
But it seems like the instinct is to overcompensate, lock everything down. Zegart gives these examples, like classifying the recipe for invisible ink or a memo about Elvis meeting Nixon.
Okay, come on, that's ridiculous.
I know, right? It's kind of funny. But you see the problem, right? If everything's top secret, then nothing really is.
And it just creates more distrust, not just between the public and these agencies, but even within the intelligence community, which kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? If you're trying to, stop terrorists and all that, you got to be able to talk to each other.
Exactly. It's like, what that's saying, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Only in this case, the right hand is convinced the left hand is up to something shady, but they won't say what.
This is why it's so important to educate people about how intelligence actually works. Because if they don't know, well, they'll just fill in the blanks with whatever they see on TV, which is usually
Spy attainment, back to that, right?
full circle. The more people watch those unrealistic shows, the less they understand the real deal. And then the less they understand, the more they believe those same shows. It's a mess.
It's a problem because those misconceptions, they affect things.
Yeah.
We talked about how 24 might be influencing how people think about torture.
And shows like Homeland feeding into those deep state theories. It's like we're being trained to see the intelligence community as this all-powerful, shadowy force, always pulling the strings.
Which makes it really tough to have a real conversation about the role of intelligence in a democracy. Because, let's be real, they do need some level of secrecy to do their jobs.
Okay, sure, but again, where's the line?
Yeah.
How do you balance that with transparency, with accountability? That's something Zegart keeps coming back to.
She suggests a few things, like way more public education about intelligence, not just in schools, but everywhere. The idea is to give people a better grasp on how it all works, what the limits are, why it even matters in the first place.
So basically what we're doing with this deep dive.
There you go. But it's not just about the public either. Zegart says agencies need to be more open about what they're doing without putting national security at risk.
Easier said than done,
Yeah.
right? You can't give away all your secrets, but you can't operate in a black box either. There's got to be some kind of middle ground, some way to build trust without spilling the beans.
There has to be.
Yeah.
And that's where journalists and academics and watchdog groups come in. They can be that outside voice, hold everyone accountable.
Okay, so let's say we figure out the transparency thing. The public's informed, there's proper oversight. What happens then? What does the future of intelligence look like? Because if there's one thing spies, lies, and algorithms makes clear, it's that the old ways aren't cutting it in the digital age.
Right. Everything's changing so fast. And one of the biggest game changers, Zegart argues, is going to be artificial intelligence. We've talked about deep fakes. But that's nothing compared to what AI could do for intelligence work.
It's kind of hard to even imagine, right? Like AI could be analyzing social media, financial transactions, phone calls, finding patterns, spotting threats, all in the blink of an eye. Faster and better than humans ever could.
It'd be like having an army of super analysts working around the clock.
But then, wouldn't that make human analysts obsolete? Like, what would be the point?
That's a good question. But Zegart doesn't think AI will replace humans entirely. More like it'll enhance them, free them up from the boring stuff so they can focus on the big picture.
Oh, I see. So instead of replacing analysts, AI becomes like a superpower research assistant, handling the grunt work so the humans can actually think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are always risks with powerful tools, right? One worry is that AI could end up creating self-fulfilling prophecies.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. If an algorithm predicts something is going to happen, people might act in ways that make it more likely to happen.
Ah, so it's like a feedback loop. The prediction influences the outcome.
Right. That's why it's crucial to use these tools carefully and remember that there can be unintended consequences.
It's like, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it, but with algorithms.
Exactly. And that's just one ethical dilemma that AI brings up when it comes to intelligence.
It's a lot to consider. But Zegart doesn't shy away from these tough questions. Spies, lies, and algorithms really makes you face the challenges and the possibilities of this new world.
And it really underlines how important it is to think critically, make ethical choices, and be a little bit skeptical about all the information out there. Those things were important during the Cold War, sure.
But now, they're even more important.
Absolutely, because now everyone's a potential source of information and a potential target. The stakes are incredibly high.
And the thing is, it's not just governments with these super advanced tools anymore. Zegart talks about NGOs, even just regular people, using open source intelligence to do some amazing stuff.
Right. It's incredible. The democratization of intelligence. She talks about those guys, David Albright and Fabian Heinz. They've been using satellite imagery and public data to keep tabs on North Korea's nuclear program for years.
Think about that. They're not spies. They're basically citizen journalists. But with really good tech, makes you wonder what they've been able to find out, stuff that maybe even the official agencies missed.
It's huge. And it's not just them. There are NGOs out there using open source intelligence to track human rights abuses, keep an eye on elections, even spot environmental damage. It's amazing. It's like the whole world's turning into one giant intelligence agency, everyone playing their part.
In a way, yeah. But that means we have to be careful, too. We've talked about all the misinformation out there. So when it comes to open source intelligence, how do you know what's real?
That's the question, isn't it? Anyone can tweet a rumor or fake a picture.
Exactly. You can't just take things at face value anymore. You got to ask questions, double-check everything, be suspicious of anything that seems too good to be true.
It's like we all need to become amateur intelligence analysts, constantly vetting the information we see.
Kinda, yeah. Because we're overloaded with information these days. Knowledge is power, but only if it's accurate.
And then there's, what did Zegart call it? Automated analytics. All those algorithms sifting through mountains of data faster than we can even imagine.
It's mind-blowing how fast that technology is developing. It could totally change how we do intelligence analysis. Think about it, analyzing every social media post, every financial transaction, every phone call, looking for anything suspicious.
Well, it's kind of scary, honestly, but also incredible. But are we putting too much faith in these tools? What if the algorithms miss something? What about the human side of intelligence?
Zegart talks about that too. She's not saying these tools are perfect. They can be biased. They make mistakes. People can manipulate them. That's why we still need humans in the loop to make judgments, not just rely on the machines.
Because at the end of the day, intelligence is about understanding the world, right? Understanding people, figuring out what they're going to do. I'm not sure a computer can ever do that as well as a human.
And that's the key, I think. Finding that sweet spot between human experience and what technology can do, working together.
That's a good takeaway, I think. This whole conversation about spies, lies, and algorithms has been eye-opening. It's a different world out there, that's for sure. But some things never change. Critical thinking, ethics, being a little skeptical, those are still just as important as ever.
If not more so. Because now the stakes are higher for everyone.
It's a lot to take in, but it's not hopeless. We can all be more informed, more engaged. We can demand better from our leaders, from ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's why this book is so important. It's not just a peek behind the curtain of espionage. It's a call to action for all of us.
So there you have it, our deep dive into Spies, Lies, and Algorithms by Amy Zegart. We hope it got you thinking, and maybe even a little uncomfortable, because sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and stay curious.